If the day ever came when I vanished from this company, it would never be by accident. I remember thinking that as I walked into the governance wing that Monday morning. Coffee still too hot to drink, my inbox already exploding. A junior coordinator, breathless and jittery, waved a packet at me. "Sable, I thought you were prepping the board materials for Thursday. Evan reassigned it to me last night." I took the packet from her hand, turned it over, and read the revision stamp. Evan Acker. Effective immediately. I did not react. If he needs help, tell him the reference files are on the shared drive. I said. My voice stayed steady, though something inside me shifted, like a floorboard loosening under my feet. Down the hall, 2 analysts whispered as I passed. They stopped when they noticed me, their eyes dropping to their screens as if I were a supervisor they barely remembered. Maybe that was the point. When I reached my desk, my calendar blinked red. The weekly leadership briefing I had run for more than a decade had vanished. Not rescheduled, deleted. I refreshed the screen twice, then opened the audit trail. The deletion was marked by organizer, but I was the organizer. I had never touched it. "Maybe it is time," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Jonas Pierce, the newly minted junior vice president, leaning against my cubicle wall with that practiced, friendly smirk. "The new generation will handle these things. Sable, you can breathe a little." "I breathe just fine," I said. He chuckled softly, as if humoring an aging relative. "Of course. Just letting you know the winds are shifting." I waited until he left before I sat down. My fingertips hovered over the keyboard. My chest felt tight, not from panic, but from recognition. This was not random, not a mistake. Someone had started rewriting the map, and they were erasing me one meeting, one privilege, one responsibility at a time. I closed my laptop slowly and stood. I needed to see what else they thought they could remove. Because if the day ever came when I vanished from this company, it would never be by accident. And today, it seemed, was when the rewriting had begun. By the time I sat down that afternoon, a stack of policy binders still waiting beside my monitor, another alert flashed across my screen. Access changed view only. It was the governance archive, the one I had built line by line across more than 10 years. I clicked again, thinking it was a glitch. The same message blinked back. Then a second alert, token revoked internal security. I stood immediately and crossed the hall to the small IT alcove. Mark Jensen, the systems manager, was hunched over his keyboard. He stiffened when he saw my shadow. "Mark," I said quietly, "someone just downgraded my admin rights." He pretended not to hear. "Busy morning. Lots of updates. Updates do not revoke a senior analyst's governance token." His hands froze over the keys. "I do not control the orders. They come from higher up." He kept his eyes glued to the screen. "Who I pressed." He swallowed. "I am not supposed to say, 'You should talk to leadership.'" I walked out before he could finish. When I returned to my desk, another deletion notice sat in my inbox. A recurring board prep session for the Friday meeting, the one I prepared every month, had been removed from my calendar. The organizer listed was Sable Hartwell. I stared at my own name for a long moment. My phone buzzed. A notification from the document routing system. New access controller assigned Evan Acker. I opened the file permissions window. His name sat at the top of the hierarchy, above mine, above governance, above every process I had spent more than a decade maintaining. At that exact moment, a message popped up from Evan himself. "Hi, Sable. Looping myself into your workflows. Streamlining." I typed nothing. He did not deserve a reply, and I did not need to ask why. The pattern was too deliberate to ignore. Meetings vanishing, permissions shifting, my own name being used to wipe myself out. Someone had already decided how far I was supposed to fall, and all I could do was watch the steps rearrange beneath me. The message arrived just after noon. "Sable, Please come to 15th floor conference 3. HR present. No explanation. No subject line. Just a summons. When the elevator doors opened, I saw the glass room before I even stepped out. The walls made everything visible, every expression, every shift, every imbalance of power. Evan Acker sat inside, shuffling a stack of papers, mouthing lines to himself like a man practicing courage in the mirror. He looked up when I entered. Sable, glad you could make it. I closed the door behind me. You requested me. Here I am. Mira Dalton, the HR director, cleared her throat. Let us get started. This is part of the firm's strategic refresh. Evan straightened. We have been evaluating legacy roles to align with modern operational needs. Mira continued, her voice soft but rehearsed. Your position has been designated redundant. We are implementing a legacy phase-out across governance. I stared at her. Effective when effective immediately, she said, sliding an envelope across the table. Your access will be deactivated within the hour. We will need your badge before you leave. Evan leaned back, relieved to let her carry the weight. This shift is not personal. Sable. It is about progress. I opened the envelope and scanned the documents. First page acknowledgement of termination. Second page non-disclosure. Third page non-compete. Mira gestured. You can sign all 3 here. I will sign one, I said. Evan blinked. Which one? The acknowledgement that you told me. I reached into my blazer and pulled out my fountain pen. Mira frowned. We have pens. I will use mine. The nib touched the paper with a familiar weight. Blue ink, pressure steady, signature clean. I pushed the signed page back toward her and closed the envelope. Evan exhaled as if the hardest part were over. Security can escort you down, if you prefer privacy. I know the way out, I said. I walked past the glass walls, past the staring faces, past the people who suddenly had nothing to say. I felt like a ghost leaving the place I built, but every step sharpened something inside me. They believed they had ended my story. They had no idea what they had just activated. I did not cry when I reached home. I set my bag on the counter, fed my cat, and sat in front of the old laptop I kept for one reason only. Its password was a string of numbers tied to a merger no one talked about anymore. I typed them in one by one. The encrypted archive blinked awake. 6 years earlier, during a frantic capital raise, the firm had rewritten half its operating structure. Investors were nervous, executives were careless, and I had been the only person in the room steady enough to stitch everything together without losing my mind. Back then, they called me indispensable. Now they called me redundant. I scrolled through folder after folder until I found it. Contingency instruments, merger year. I clicked. A list of documents appeared: agreements, approvals, emergency plans. One file sat at the bottom, flagged with an old internal note. Buyout agreement governance officers. I opened it slowly. The language came back to me immediately. A protection clause crafted for key governance staff if they were ever removed because of nepotism. Political shifts, or exact phrase familial leadership restructuring. I remembered drafting the early version while the chief financial officer panicked about investor lawsuits, and the chief executive officer signed anything I put in front of him. Page 2. Detailed activation requirements. 1. Involuntary termination. 2. Termination linked to a family member executive. 3. Signature verification using the officer's authenticated writing instrument. I leaned closer. My initials sat in the margins beside several lines notes I had written in a rush all those years ago. I was not just covered by the clause. I was its architect. I reached for my bag and took out the fountain pen I had used in the glass conference room. Its weight felt different now, heavier, more precise. Every requirement matched my firing exactly. My pulse did not spike. It steadied, deep and measured, like something inside me aligning into place. They thought they buried the old documents. They thought they buried me. And now they had stepped on the trap I built with my own hands. By mid-morning, I was sitting in a narrow office tucked behind a vape shop on Hawthorne Boulevard. The smell of artificial mint leaked through the thin wall, but Gerald Knox barely noticed. He adjusted his glasses, spread the documents across his desk, and read every line with the kind of attention I rarely saw in corporate leadership. "You drafted this?" he asked without looking up. "I drafted the framework," I said. "Legal polished it during the merger," he grunted, tapping the buyout clause with the back of his pen. "This is not polishing. This is a steel trap." I waited while he flipped page after page, comparing signatures, cross-checking the activation language. His movements were methodical, confident, almost surgical. After a long minute, he set the papers down. "It is enforceable." I exhaled. Fully," he repeated. "It is binding, state compliant, and already triggered the moment they fired you under a family-led restructure. They signed it. They notarized it. They stored it." He pointed to the clause. "And you met every activation requirement without lifting a finger." I placed my fountain pen on the desk. "Can you verify the signature match?" Gerald opened a drawer, pulled out a pressure scan pad, and slid my pen across it. He compared the digital readout to the archived signature embedded in the clause. A small smile formed. "Perfect match." He reached for his stamp kit. "I will notarize 2 duplicates, file the timestamp logs, and prepare the activation submission. The moment you choose to send this, the control provisions go live." I watched him press the heavy stamp onto the page. That sound, solid, final, felt like a door opening instead of closing. He leaned back. "Sable, they did not fire you. They empowered you." I picked up the newly stamped documents, feeling their weight settle into my hands. For the first time in days. My steps were steady as I walked out of his office. The mechanism was armed. Now I had to decide when to release it. The morning of the board meeting, I walked through the lobby as if nothing had changed. My badge rested in my palm, warm from the drive over. I pressed it to the main turnstile. It beeped green. The guard behind the desk frowned, then looked at his monitor. You're clear to enter. Ms. Hartwell." I nodded once and moved on. Mini escalation number 1. Inside the elevator, I pressed the button for 17. The light blinked, then held. No denial tone, no override, no security lockout. 17 lit up like I still belonged. Mini escalation number 2. When the doors opened, Evan Acker stood near the lobby seating area, flipping through his notes with nervous energy. He looked up, saw me, and went completely still. "Sable," he said, voice thinning at the edges. You are not supposed to be here. I am exactly where I need to be." His jaw tightened. "This is a closed session. You cannot." I walked past him, straight toward conference room 17B. Through the glass. Half the board was already seated. They noticed me instantly. Whispers, shifts in posture, someone's smirk forming before the joke even landed. Evan hurried in behind me. "Security!" he snapped. "Now!" 2 guards entered seconds later. One stepped toward me, palms lowered like he was approaching an animal he did not want to startle. "Please leave the room, ma'am." I met his gaze. "That is impossible. I am chairing the board meeting." A ripple of laughter spread across the table, quiet, dismissive. Exactly what they wanted me to hear. The second guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said more firmly, "please cooperate." I stood there, steady, anchored by the documents in my bag and the truth none of them had read. They thought this was the moment I would be removed. They had no idea someone else was already on their way to stop the removal. The guard stepped closer, ready to take my elbow, when the conference room door swung open hard enough to rattle the glass. Gerald Knox strode in with a thick folder tucked under his arm. His expression was calm, almost bored, but his voice cut across the room with surgical precision. "Ma'am, stay right where you are." The guards froze. The board stopped whispering. Even Evan's mouth fell open slightly, as if someone had yanked the air out of him. Gerald moved past the guards without acknowledging them. "This meeting cannot proceed," he said, projecting his voice toward the long table. "Not while an active governance dispute is under legal review." Evan sputtered. "What dispute? There is no dispute. She was terminated." Gerald placed the folder on the center of the table and flipped it open. "Incorrect. Ms. Hartwell's termination triggered a dormant protection clause tied to governance oversight and board integrity. Until this clause is formally addressed, any board action is legally invalid." The board chair, Loretta Finch, leaned forward. Her fingers hovered over the first page. "Is this an investor-level control instrument?" "Yes," Gerald replied. "A high-grade one. Signed, notarized, and still binding." Loretta's eyes narrowed with recognition. "I have seen this structure before. It overrides executive session authority." Evan's complexion drained. "Hold on. That cannot be. This is ancient paperwork. It is irrelevant." Gerald tapped the signature line at the bottom of the page. "It is relevant, enforceable, and tied directly to the leadership restructure you initiated." He turned to the guards. "Stand down. Ms. Hartwell remains within her rights to be here." The guards stepped back immediately. I did not move. I did not speak. I did not need to. Every person in the room could feel it, the shift, the weight, the authority settling exactly where it had been built to land. The document they dismissed now outranked every person seated at that table. Gerald slid the top page toward the center of the table. "Let us walk through the activation," he said, "so there is no misunderstanding." Evan lifted a hand. "We do not need Loretta Finch cut him off with a single glance. Let him speak." Gerald nodded once. "Condition 1, involuntary termination." He tapped the termination notice. "Documented, effective immediately, per your own language." Mira Dalton from HR shrank in her chair. "Condition 2, Gerald continued. Termination tied to familial leadership restructuring." His eyes flicked to Evan. "You, Mr. Acker, were promoted 2 months ago. As the chief executive officer's son-in-law, your appointment qualifies as a structural leadership shift." Evan's jaw clenched. "This is reaching." "It is not reaching," Loretta said quietly. "It is precise." Gerald turned the page. Condition 3, signature verification using Ms. Hartwell's authenticated instrument. He lifted my fountain pen from the folder. The room watched as he placed it beside the printed signature. Pressure curve, ink density, and angle match perfectly. Independent verification complete. Loretta raised her eyes to me. "You signed this the day they fired you." I nodded once, only the acknowledgement. On the screen behind them, Gerald projected the archived digital record. The old chief executive officer's signature glowed at the bottom, dated 6 years earlier, tied to an emergency governance package they had forgotten. A legal counsel in the corner checked his tablet. His eyes widened. The system already processed the activation. The clause is live. Evan lurched forward. "Pause it. Lock it. Do something. We cannot," the counsel whispered. "It is done." Gerald turned the final page. The clause delegates full rights to the governance trust overseeing all executive equity. Control authority transfers to Ms. Hartwell until the clause is satisfied. Loretta leaned back slowly, her expression shifting from shock to acceptance. "Sable, the authority is yours." Power settled into the room, not loud, not dramatic, but absolute, as if it had simply found its way back home. The room filled with a low, constant buzzing phones, tablets, and laptops vibrating one after another. No one moved at first. Then Loretta checked her screen, and her breath caught. "Ownership indices are updating," she said. "In real time." The legal counsel's tablet chimed next. "The governance trust has re-indexed. Control authority now lists Ms. Hartwell as primary administrator." A third notification hit, louder, sharper. An SEC confirmation, Loretta murmured. Filed automatically. Across the table, the chief executive officer shot to his feet. No. No, this is not happening. Freeze it. Undo it. I am ordering a reversal. The legal counsel shook his head. There is no reversal protocol. The clause is irrevocable once triggered. Evan slammed his hand against the table. She planned this. She set us up. Gerald straightened. She did not plan anything. You triggered a clause you neglected to read. You activated it with your own decisions. You are lying, Evan snapped. Gerald's voice sharpened. If I were lying, the financial notification from the commission would not be sitting in your inbox. The chief executive officer turned to Loretta. You cannot let this stand. She is not leadership. She is not even staff. Loretta's gaze shifted to me. She is the trust authority now. Whether she remains staff is irrelevant. I reached into my bag, removed my old company badge, and placed it on the table. I rotated it slowly until my name faced Evan. This belonged to someone you thought you could erase. I said, but you should not have signed what you did not bother reading. Evan's face flushed, his jaw tight enough to shake. The chief executive officer sank back down, defeated, while the rest of the board watched in stunned silence. Every device in the room continued to buzz with confirmations my name replacing theirs. Line by line, authority by authority. Power did not arrive with shouting or triumph. It settled into me quietly, firmly, as though it had always been waiting. The room was still buzzing with scattered alerts when I stood. No one spoke. Even Evan kept his eyes lowered, as if looking up would make the situation more real. I did not return to punish anyone. I said. My voice stayed level, steady enough that several heads lifted. I came because something twisted in my absence. Processes I built were bent. Standards I upheld were ignored. That needed to be corrected. Loretta rested her hands on the table. You have authority to dictate next steps. I know. I looked directly at her, then at the rest of the board. For now, I will assume temporary governance control. Every failed oversight, every rushed approval, every conflict buried under convenience, those will be reviewed cleanly, transparently. The chief executive officer rubbed his forehead, exhausted. And after that, what do you want? Sable. What I always wanted, I said. A company that honors the work done in its name. Evan lifted his head. You cannot lead us. I have no intention of leading you. I replied, leadership is earned, and right now, none of you have earned my trust. I turned the badge on the table once more, letting the silence settle. What I have earned is the right to choose what happens next. Loretta exhaled. Do you plan to keep the trust long-term for now? I plan to stabilize what you all destabilized. After the audit, I will consider my options. If selling becomes the right path, it will be on my terms, not yours. Gerald gathered the documents, waiting quietly by the door. I stepped back, taking one last look at the people who had once believed they could erase me. Then I straightened my shoulders. If the day ever came when I vanished from this company, I said, it would never be by accident. I walked out, taller than I entered, the authority mine to carry or release as I chose. When a woman finally defines her exit, who in the world could stop her?